Um, Reading through our source material for today honestly felt a bit like, I don't know, watching the internet try to upgrade its own engine while flying down the highway at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, it really does feel exactly like that. Just this massive, high-speed overhaul.
You're right. So our mission today is to unpack the absolute latest insights from Andrew Kagan's weekly newsletter. We are looking at a stack of updates spanning 8 key technical areas, from Azure infrastructure all the way down to your daily Microsoft 365 end user experiences.
There's a lot of ground to cover.
It is a ton, but the goal is to extract the most actionable, transformative nuggets of knowledge for you without letting you drown in the information overload. So, okay, let's unpack this. What is the real story hiding inside all these separate technical updates?
Well, the central narrative tying all this together is that we're aggressively moving into what the industry is calling the agentic era. Across the entire tech stack, artificial intelligence is fundamentally shifting its posture.
Moving away from just being a chatbot, right?
Exactly. It's moving from being a passive tool, like something you just prompt to answer a question, into an autonomous agent capable of executing really complex, multi-step workflows entirely on its own.
Right. So it's the difference between asking an AI, hey, how do I create a workspace? And literally just telling the AI to go build the workspace, import the data, and set the permissions.
Yes, but before an AI can actually act autonomously like that, it obviously needs deep native access to your corporate data.
Which brings us to the evolution of Microsoft Fabric. It's essentially becoming an AI native operating system using something called the Model Context Protocol, or MCP.
Yeah, the Model Context Protocol is a massive leap forward. I mean, think of MCP as the USB standard, but for artificial intelligence.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right, because before this open standard came along, which was originally created by Anthropic, by the way, if you wanted an AI agent to interact with a specific database or software platform, developers had to build custom integrations for everything.
They had to deal with unique API wrappers and, brittle authentication flows for every single tool.
Exactly. MCP replaces all that bespoke plumbing. It just gives AI a universal, standardized way to discover and operate external systems.
And the sources highlight 2 distinct flavors of this for Fabric. You've got the local MCP and the remote MCP.
Yeah, so the local MCP is generally available now, and that runs on your local machine.
So if a developer is pair programming with an AI assistant like GitHub Copilot, the AI uses local MCP to read the actual API docs, generate the code, and maybe move some data from a local machine to the cloud.
Precisely. But then you have the Fabric Remote MCP, which is currently in preview, and this is cloud-hosted.
Right.
This is what allows an autonomous agent built in Copilot Studio to perform real operations, like creating workspaces or managing access on behalf of a team, without a human sitting there hitting run.
I have to pause here, though, because giving an AI agent direct remote MCP access to our core enterprise data platforms sounds like a recipe for accidentally deleting the entire company database. I mean, isn't that incredibly dangerous?
Well, it would be without the proper architecture. Security is the most critical component of this release. The remote MCP doesn't just give the AI a blank check.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. It relies on Microsoft Entra ID authentication. That means the agent operates strictly within the role-based access control boundaries of the user who authorized it.
So it physically cannot exceed those permissions.
Exactly. But on top of that, there are built-in framework safeguards. Most notably, there's this thing called the isConsequential flag.
But who actually sets that flag? Does the AI just magically know it's about to do something destructive? Or does a developer have to code that boundary in advance?
It's baked into the API definition itself. When developers expose an endpoint to the agent, let's say a delete table command, they flag that specific action as consequential in the schema.
Oh, I see.
So when the agent decides it needs to call that endpoint, the MCP framework recognizes the flag and triggers a hard stop. It basically forces the agent to suspend execution and request explicit human confirmation before proceeding.
Okay, that definitely helps me sleep a bit better. And, every single action the agent takes is immutably logged in the Fabric audit logs anyway.
Exactly. You always have a paper trail.
And speaking of how fast these models are operating in the data space, Kagan's newsletter highlighted a really stunning real-world application of Microsoft Discovery. Syensqo, which is a materials and chemicals company, used Microsoft Discovery's AI models paired with high-performance computing to identify a novel non-PFAS data center coolant prototype.
And they did it in just about 200 hours.
200 hours. That is insane.
It really is. 200 hours to find a viable, environmentally safer chemical alternative is just an incredible acceleration of traditional research and development.
It really highlights what happens when you combine large-scale reasoning models with these agentic workflows.
And those underlying reasoning models are getting sharper across the board. The documentation for Anthropic's Claude Opus 4.7, which just became generally available in Microsoft 365 Copilot, specifically notes its massive improvements.
Specifically for handling advanced long-running software engineering tasks, right?
Yeah, with real consistency. It doesn't just write a short script anymore. It can plan and execute an entire migration strategy.
But you obviously cannot run Claude Opus 4.7 or these massive reasoning models on a standard laptop. To process that scale of data, organizations need serious physical infrastructure.
They absolutely do.
Which brings us to Azure. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella just announced that their massive $3.3 billion Fairwater AI data center in Wisconsin is officially going live ahead of schedule.
That is a colossal injection of raw compute into the ecosystem.
It's like upgrading the brain's raw computing power.
Yes, but raw compute alone isn't enough. When you are running autonomous agents across a highly distributed architecture, you need flawless visibility into what those agents are actually doing.
Right, which is why the Azure Monitor pipeline becoming generally available is such a critical piece of the puzzle. It offers a secure, high-scale ingestion pipeline specifically for open telemetry. It's essentially the nervous system delivering vital signals so the brain doesn't drop any packets.
That's a great analogy.
But why is open telemetry so vital in this specific context?
Because, well, think about it. When an autonomous agent is executing a 50-step workflow across a dozen different microservices and step 42 fails, you need to know exactly why it failed.
You can't just guess.
No, you can't. OpenTelemetry standardizes how logs, metrics, and traces are collected. The new Azure Monitor pipeline acts as this massive high-speed funnel to securely ingest all that standardized data across any environment.
Ensuring developers have the exact trace data they need to debug the agent's logic?
Exactly. We're also seeing the walls come down between massive enterprise data silos.
Yeah, the newsletter points out that Oracle workloads can now migrate to Oracle AI database on Azure. That means customers can seamlessly bridge their legacy Oracle data directly into modern analytical engines like Fabric and Copilot Studio.
So we have the raw compute, the telemetry funnel, and the data bridging. But the next logical question is, how does this infrastructure change the day-to-day reality of the people actually building the software?
It completely upends it. Moving into DevOps and software engineering, the sources talk about a massive shift toward what they call agentic refactoring.
Yes. Developers are pairing GitHub Copilot with micro VMs via Docker Sandbox.
And the documentation literally refers to this as running agents in YOLO mode. YOLO mode.
YOLO mode is a fantastic, if slightly terrifying name for a very elegant engineering solution.
It really is.
Typically, when you ask an AI to refactor an old code base, let's say updating deprecated APIs across a massive enterprise application, the agent requires constant human approval for every single file it touches.
Right, because if you don't do that, an AI hallucination could accidentally wipe out critical business logic.
Exactly. But that constant prompting causes massive approval fatigue for the developer. They just start clicking approve without looking.
So how does the Docker Sandbox fix that?
By providing an impenetrable security boundary. The micro VM is an isolated, completely disposable environment. Because the agent is running inside this tightly constrained sandbox, it can execute mass refactorings across thousands of legacy repos without needing permission prompts for every single change.
So if the agent makes a mistake and breaks the build, it doesn't matter. It only broke the disposable VM.
Precisely. It protects the host machine entirely. As a result, the sources note that agents operating in this secure YOLO mode are merging 60% more pull requests.
Wow, 60%. It is a continuous high-velocity modernization operation.
It really is.
And that same push for absolute consistency is hitting deployment workflows, too. The newsletter highlighted a fast-focused Azure DevOps video emphasizing the critical shift away from ClickOps.
ClickOps being the old method, where a developer just clicks around the Azure portal, manually setting up servers, hoping they remember the exact right configuration from last time.
Yeah, ClickOps is fragile, undocumented, and just impossible to scale. The shift the video advocates for is a strict move to idempotent infrastructure as code, using declarative languages like ARM or BICEP.
Let's define idempotent for a second, because that's a really crucial concept for anyone listening.
Yeah.
Idempotent simply means that an operation produces the exact same result no matter how many times you run it.
So if you run a BICEP template to deploy a database, and the database already exists and matches the template, the pipeline does nothing.
Right. It just verifies the state. It ensures your environment perfectly matches your code every single time without duplicating resources.
The sources also provided a really clean breakdown of how modern distributed services should actually communicate with each other. It's a great little cheat sheet.
Oh, yeah. Use REST at the edge for public APIs, use gRPC for internal hot paths, and use events for asynchronous workflows.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that breakdown is so important because it aligns perfectly with how agents operate.
Right. REST is great for external communication because it uses standard HTTP protocols, and JSON, which is highly readable. But JSON is heavy.
Super heavy.
Yeah, so gRPC uses protocol buffers, which compress data into a lightweight binary format. It is incredibly fast, making it perfect for internal microservices talking to each other behind the firewall where latency is the ultimate enemy.
And then events are used when a service needs to drop a message in a queue and immediately move on without waiting around for a response.
Exactly. This level of architectural standardization is exactly why the new Microsoft Foundry toolkit for VS Code just went generally available. It provides developers the pre-configured tooling they need to build, test, and deploy these AI and cloud-native solutions efficiently.
But, the beautiful thing about the agentic era is that modernization isn't just restricted to pro developers writing BICEP templates in VS Code. Low-code platforms like Power Platform and Dynamics 365 are empowering everyday business analysts to build enterprise-grade agents too.
The democratization of these capabilities is where organizations are unlocking immense hidden value.
There was a brilliant use case highlighted in the newsletter regarding Copilot Studio. It detailed building an intelligent vendor onboarding agent for a hypothetical company called ABC Consulting.
Oh, the onboarding process. In the traditional model, a vendor would email PDFs of their business registration and insurance certificates. A human employee would manually review the PDFs, key the data into a CRM, and then email a manager for approval.
It's a textbook example of a process that is slow, highly prone to human error, and completely lacks audit visibility.
But with the Copilot Studio agent, the vendor just uploads the files directly into a chat interface.
And the AI builder automatically extracts the critical data from the forms.
Yep. It checks for missing information, calculates a risk score based on predefined business rules, and then automatically routes the approval. If it's low risk, the agent auto-approves it.
Medium risk gets routed to a manager, and high risk goes straight to compliance. The sources state this single agent reduces vendor onboarding time by 70%.
70%. And what's powering the scale of that operation under the hood is Dataverse. Dataverse is providing hyperscale capabilities like semantic search, which allows the AI to actually understand the contextual meaning of the business data, rather than just matching keywords.
It also introduced new GenAI prompt columns, letting users define complex business logic simply by writing a natural language prompt directly into a database column.
Which is wild. Even Power Pages is introducing agentic code skills, like the add server logic command. The AI basically analyzes your website prototype and automatically generates secure server-side JavaScript endpoints.
But I want to bring up a vital quote from the Business Applications Spring 2026 update. Ryan Cunningham, the CVP of Power Platform, pointed out a major trap companies are falling into right now. He said people are just vibe coding the last generation's legacy apps.
Okay, I hear that criticism, but practically speaking, isn't recreating a known legacy app just the safest way for a risk-averse company to test the waters with AI? You take a process you already understand, and you just have the AI execute it.
It definitely feels safer in the short term, but it's a massive strategic trap. I mean, if you just use cutting-edge AI to build the exact same clunky 10-step manual approval chains that you used to build by hand, you are completely missing the point.
You're just speeding up a bad process.
Right. The goal isn't to build bad software faster. The goal is to fundamentally rethink how work flows across the company now that intelligent automation is actually available.
That is a very fair point. It requires a paradigm shift from optimizing the old way to inventing the new way. And that brings us to the end-user experience in Microsoft 365.
Because if developers and business analysts are building these powerful new agents, how are everyday employees actually interacting with them in their daily office workflows?
Well, one of the most surprisingly powerful updates in this space is that SharePoint and OneDrive now feature native support for Markdown files, the .md extension.
I know you love this one.
I really do. I have to admit, I get a little overly excited about Markdown support.
Oh, I know. But for the average user listening, why is a plain text formatting language such a big deal?
Because it serves as the perfect bridge between human intent and machine execution.
Yeah.
As an AI agent carries out autonomous work, it needs a centralized place to store its instructions, its systemic context, and its behavioral rules.
And the new Agent Assets library in SharePoint uses these plain text markdown files to clearly separate what an AI needs to know from how it should act.
Exactly.
So why is Markdown better for this than, say, just a standard Word document?
Well, when an AI reads a Word document, it has to parse a massive amount of hidden XML formatting overhead. Markdown strips all that away. The token count is incredibly lightweight, but the structural hierarchy, like your headers, your bullet points, your bold text, all of that is preserved perfectly for the agent's context window.
So it's a durable, version-controlled artifact.
Yeah, it is simple enough that any human can open it in a browser and tweak the instructions, but it is structured enough that an AI can follow it flawlessly without needing a complex developer GI.
It totally demystifies the AI's logic. You don't have to be a programmer to change how the agent behaves. You literally just edit a text file.
Right. And the interface for actually speaking to that AI is becoming incredibly conversational too. For example, Copilot in the Power BI mobile app now allows for full, open-ended back-and-forth chat right from a phone.
So you aren't limited to clicking pre-built prompt buttons anymore. You can interrogate your enterprise data while standing in line for coffee.
The ubiquity of these agents is staggering. They are becoming the default interface for the digital landscape.
Which triggers a wild realization when we look at the industry news and trends section of Kagan's newsletter. Welcome to the agentic web.
The agentic web.
Yeah. If end users are increasingly just talking to an AI, and that AI is fetching data, summarizing articles, and even making purchasing decisions on their behalf, it completely breaks the fundamental economics of the internet.
We are seeing the massive infrastructure of digital commerce actively adapt to this reality right now. Microsoft just launched AI Max, which expands query matching and personalizes ad delivery across AI surfaces like Copilot.
They also rolled out tools like Offer Highlights, which surface key selling points like free shipping or return policies directly within the flow of AI conversations.
But the most significant change behind the scenes is the new Universal Commerce Protocol in Microsoft Merchant Center. It forces retailers to structure their product data specifically so AI agents can independently discover, evaluate, and transact on it.
So, what does this all mean? It means the entire game of SEO and digital marketing has fundamentally changed. Brands can no longer just optimize their websites for human eyeballs and human clicks.
No, they have to optimize their underlying data structures to be selected and trusted by the AI systems that are doing the actual discovery and purchasing on a human's behalf.
It's a massive shift from search engine optimization to AI logic optimization.
But, this raises a rather alarming question. If AI agents are independently buying things on the web, writing enterprise code in YOLO mode, and reading our Markdown instructions, how on earth do we keep them from being compromised?
Exactly. Securing the autonomous enterprise is the defining challenge of this era, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The newsletter highlighted a recent data breach at Vercel driven by an OAuth compromise, which was reported by guards.
It's a stark reminder that the traditional network firewall is basically obsolete. Identity is the new perimeter. And the threat isn't always complex software vulnerabilities, it's often just basic human engineering.
Like what the Microsoft security blog recently detailed with the cross-tenant helpdesk impersonation playbook. Attackers are exploiting remote verification processes to trick IT helpdesks into granting access to an account, which then allows for lateral movement and massive data exfiltration.
So how do IT teams fight back against both human engineering and the potential of a compromised AI agent?
It starts with absolute visibility and strict access control. Microsoft just announced the general availability of license usage insights in Microsoft Entra. It allows administrators to spot underutilized security controls by analyzing 6-month usage trends.
So if your organization is paying for advanced risk-based access policies, but a department hasn't actually turned them on, this dashboard highlights that vulnerability instantly.
We also saw Entra Backup and Recovery dramatically expand its protections for both soft and hard dilutions, providing a much-needed safety net against malicious directory wipes.
But what about the AI agents themselves? How do you secure the ABC consulting vendor bot we talked about earlier? Does it just use the permissions of the person who built it?
No, and this is a vital architectural detail. With the rollout of Agent 365, every autonomous agent gets its own Microsoft Entra ID.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it doesn't piggyback on a shared service account, and it doesn't quietly use your personal user account when it runs a background task at 2 a.m. It is treated as a first-class security principal in the directory.
Meaning you can govern it just like an employee.
Exactly. It is subjected to strict least privilege access, conditional access policies, and full auditing. If an agent somehow goes rogue, starts hallucinating, or is compromised by an external threat, you can revoke its specific access immediately.
Isolating the threat without taking down any human users or shutting down the broader system.
That level of granular, identity-based control is definitely reassuring. But with the entire enterprise landscape shifting from passive software to these highly governed autonomous agents, the skill sets required to just do our everyday jobs are changing overnight.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, learning and certifications. Because with identity and access being the new perimeter, basic administrative hygiene is more critical than ever.
You, as a listener, absolutely need a practical path forward to stay relevant, and it starts with the fundamentals.
The newsletter featured a great resource from Andy Malone, his Beginner's Guide to SharePoint Permissions video. It is an excellent refresher reminding users of the vital differences between owners, members, and visitors, and how to navigate classic versus modern site settings.
Because as we just discussed with MCP and Markdown files, if your underlying SharePoint permissions are a tangled mess, your AI agent is going to inherit that exact same mess. It will surface documents to people who shouldn't see them simply because the permissions were sloppy.
Right. Knowledge management and data hygiene are the prerequisites for the agentic era.
And for those wanting to officially validate their skills in this new landscape, Microsoft has released 2 brand new certifications: the AI Agent Builder Associate and the Azure AI Apps and Agents Developer Associate. Here's where it gets really interesting. You, listening to this right now, can literally go take an exam today to prove you know how to build the exact agentic future we just spent this deep dive exploring. The tools are generally available, the learning paths are mapped out, and the certifications are live.
It's an empowering thought. The transition to autonomous systems isn't just something happening to us. It's an architecture we are actively invited to build.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Andrew Kagan's newsletter. We've covered a massive shift across the whole tech stack today, from Fabric's Model Context Protocol standardizing AI integrations to Docker sandboxes making legacy code refactoring safe, all the way to vendor onboarding agents and the fundamental economic shift of the agentic web.
But before we sign off, there is one final thread from the source material that we didn't unpack, and it is absolutely worth chewing on.
Oh, what's that?
A Bloomberg TV clip included in the notes discussed Anthropic's Mythos alongside the Department of Defense's Project Maven. It detailed how AI computer vision and large language models are currently being applied to satellite and drone photography to autonomously identify warships in vast expanses of empty ocean.
Wow.
Yeah, it poses a profound question for us. If we are this excited and yet this cautious about autonomous agents approving consulting vendor forms and refactoring legacy bicep templates, how should we adapt our critical thinking and our security frameworks when these exact same agentic models are deployed for national security and military intelligence?
That is, wow, a lot to think about. It really brings us back to that feeling we started with. We are hurtling down the highway, upgrading the engine of our digital world while we're driving it. The velocity is thrilling, the capabilities are genuinely mind-bending, but we have to keep our hands firmly on the steering wheel, keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.